Three, two, one.
Hello and good morning. Happy May. I know it's been a little bit since we did an off-season check-in, but the NFL draft is in the books and it is decidedly rookie draft season. So I decided to pop back up and take a look at the class of 2024. The NFL draft was at the end of April. Going to be diving in and looking at my ranks for rookies as you're going through drafts. I'm going to be looking at my top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 running backs, top 10 receivers, plus a couple of guys in the next tier, and then top 6 at tight end. Not quite as deep of a position, but that should give you an idea that roughly at least 36. A lot of leagues are 12 teams, 3 rounds. So that should help get you going, give you an idea of how I feel about this class. Really excited. It's exciting. Rookie mini camps are taking place. We've seen a lot of the settlement after free agency. Rookie drafts are taking place in dynasty leagues. We are getting closer to the season. I'll be back in a couple of weeks and start looking at some of my dynasty ranks and where they sit post the rookie draft. Then a little bit later this offseason, we'll look at some redraft ranks, do a couple of previews division by division as we get ready for the next season. But let's dive in. We're going to kick off with rookie quarterbacks. Obviously, the first pick in the draft was Caleb Williams. A lot of excitement there. He is my number one at the quarterback position. And I think he will be a pretty good consensus 101 pick in Superflex drafts. Wouldn't be shocked if some leagues pivot and go Marvin Harrison and he falls to 2, but probably no further than 2. Behind him, Jaden Daniels was the number 2 overall pick, went to the Washington Commanders. I think he's going to be off the board by about the 3rd pick in Superflex drafts. When you get into one quarterback leagues, I've done a couple of one quarterback league rookie drafts at this point in time. I've seen Williams and or Daniels going in the late first round. Wouldn't be shocked if they fall to the second round, but those guys probably the top tier at the quarterback position. Then, there were 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round of the NFL draft. So I would expect 4 or 5 at least to go, especially in Superflex drafts. When we get to number 6, I'll tell you why I'm off a little bit. Number 3, it was a tight call. I went with JJ McCarthy. He went number 10 to the Vikings. I put him here because I like the coaching staff. I like the weapons he has a little bit better. I think it gives him a little bit better chance to succeed. Number 4, real close, Drake May. He was number 3 overall pick. He was probably the more talented prospect coming into the league. If you wanted to have him up higher, I would totally get it. I'm just not as sold on the Patriots infrastructure. A lot of pressure now on Alex Van Pelt to develop him, but what are the weapons they've surrounded him with? They went and got a couple of receivers in this draft, but none of them really moved the needle a ton for me, which we will talk about when we talk a little bit about receivers. He has Hunter Henry. They have Kendrick Bourne. I just don't think they still have a lot of weapons. I think that was part of the problem that they had with Mac Jones. Can Drake May overcome it? He can. But I have a little more reservations than the surroundings that the Vikings have given JJ McCarthy. Number 5 for me is Bo Nix. He was the last of the 6 quarterbacks that went. He comes into an interesting situation. It's hard to get a total feel for Denver. Being a fan, I always have mixed feelings about whether my fandom is interfering a little bit. In the quarterback room itself, I think he has a great chance to vault into the starting lineup. He's going against Jarrett Stidham. They acquired Zach Wilson. Not a ton of competition, but how good is this team? I still have a lot of questions about that. Number 6, Michael Penix Jr. He actually went number 8 to the Falcons. The reason I have him at 6, and honestly, he is not a player I would take in the first round of a super flex draft. I'm probably not taking him until maybe late second, but probably more into the 3rd round, which is why I don't have any shares of him. Probably won't get a lot of shares of him. I know people are jumping on the talent, and the talent's there, but they signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million deal. It'll be a good 2 or 3 years before they can get out of it without having a massive dead cap hit. I think Kirk Cousins is their starter, barring some kind of injury. Michael Penix Jr. was already a little bit of an older prospect. That doesn't totally put me off him, but the path to playing I looked back at some of the drafts with that featured Jordan Love, another player that we knew at least 1 year, but probably maybe a couple of years before we saw him go in. And there are some drafts where he went up in the first round, but there are a lot of drafts where he went a little bit later in rookie drafts because we don't know when we're going to see him. So I like the Michael Penix talent. If I have Kirk Cousins on a roster, I may think about moving up and taking him in the second round as kind of a quarterback handcuff. Beyond that, I'm going to give you the rest of my top 10. These are all guys that are going to sit behind somebody that are a little bit of development players. Number 7 for me is Spencer Rattler. I thought he was the next best quarterback off the board. I like the location at the Saints. I don't know that Derek Carr is a super long-term option, so I like that seating. Number 8 for me, Jordan Travis. He wasn't in this position going into the draft, but I bumped him up a little bit because the Jets are another place where a good development prospect, Aaron Rodgers, 40 years old, coming off of a torn Achilles. Tyrod Taylor is a veteran backup. They're all in on 2024, but they do have to look toward the future. I was expecting them to take a development quarterback somewhere. I would have preferred maybe a different passer, but Travis actually had a decent senior year at Florida State before he got injured, so it makes him somewhat interesting. Again, these are guys you're snagging and throwing on your practice squad. Number 9 for me, Michael Pratt. Jordan Love is the guy there, and he's not a particularly old quarterback prospect, but I liked Michael Pratt's potential as a development prospect. There is really not a lot of competition in that quarterback room. It's only him and Sean Clifford right now. And then number 10 for me is Sam Hartman. Another guy was kind of an interesting prospect, ended up landing with the Commanders. There are 5 quarterbacks on their roster right now. I think Marcus Mariota and Jeff Driscoll are kind of veteran presence right now. I wouldn't be surprised if Jake Fromm doesn't make the final roster, but they did just take Jaden Daniels. So what is the future for Hartman? Hard to tell. He is definitely a long shot development prospect. Other quarterbacks that went, the Patriots are the other team that doubled down on quarterbacks after taking Drake May at pick 3. They later went and got Joe Milton. I'm not feeling a great need to roster him right now because they already have Jacoby Brissett and Bailey Zappi. I think it's a long shot. He probably practice squad. Keaton Slovis, once a guy that people had some interest, went to the Colts. They have Anthony Richardson, who's going into year 2. They also got a veteran in Joe Flacco. What's the path to touches there? I'm not sure those guys need to be rostered, but if you're in a deep, deep super flex league and you're just looking to practice squad a few guys, they are out there. Let's transition to the next position, and that is running backs. This was not viewed to be a great class, and we definitely didn't see running backs go early. First one went there, as you can see, at pick number 46 in the second round. We only had a couple of guys go in the first 2 days of the draft, and none of these guys landed in spectacular spots. There's really 2 to me that have separated themselves from everyone else. My number 1 running back is Trey Benson. He wasn't the first running back taken. He was the second, but I like his landing spot with the Cardinals. James Conner, a veteran going into a contract year who's been known to miss time. They have a lot of guys on the roster, but not a lot of competition. Number 2 for me is Jonathan Brooks. He was the first running back taken. Could have a great opportunity, but there is a much bigger crowd in Carolina and much more questions. Carolina still has Miles Sanders. They recently picked up Rashad Penny, and they also have Chuba Hubbard, who looked pretty decent there. Brooks coming off of an injury as well. How big of a factor will he be early in his rookie year? That's fair to wonder. But in one quarterback leagues, I've seen both those guys moving up into the first round, and it makes sense. Running back is just a real position of need. After that, you're kind of taking shots in the dark. Number 3 for me is Blake Corum. Decent talent. He went to the Rams. I like Kyron Williams. I like what they have there. We also have seen that rookie running backs, often don't get heavily involved in the Rams offense. But Corum could be a good long-term stash. I loved Ray Davis going to the Bills. He's number 4 for me. I like James Cook, but I think they could still use a big battering ram back. We saw them getting some veterans last year. They had Leonard Fournette for a while. They've had some guys in the mix. I think there's an opportunity for Davis to step up and to get a role. Number 5 for me, Audric Estime. He went to the Broncos, and I don't know if I have him a little higher because I'm a homer or because I'm unsteady about this situation. Javonte Williams going into a contract year, so is Samaje Perine. I know they like Jaleel McLaughlin, but I don't know if Sean Payton has found the running back group or the running back rotation he loves yet. I think there's potential for Estime to earn a spot in there. Maybe doesn't have a huge rookie year, but I could see him being a guy that has good long-term value. Same thing for Marshawn Lloyd. He went to the Packers. I liked him a lot coming into the draft. I dropped him a few spots coming out of it because of the landing spot. The Packers just did a 4-year, $48 million deal with Josh Jacobs. We've seen Jacobs be a good 3-down running back. So I don't know what the path to touches exactly is there. They also brought back AJ Dillon. That doesn't scare me a lot. I think Lloyd could easily jump up to number 2, but what is the share there? 7 for me, Jalen Wright went to the Dolphins. I think this year Raheem Mostert is probably still heavily involved along with Devon Achane, but Jalen Wright, I could see Wright and Achane kind of being the tandem backs there moving forward. Number 8 for me, Braylon Allen went to the Jets. Another guy, I like the cut of him and how he works as a running back. But, the Jets have Breece Hall, and he's one of the few bell cow 3-down superstar backs. They need depth behind him. I think Braylon Allen can jump Izzy Abanikanda in the depth chart, but what is going to be his share of work? Number 9 for me, Bucky Irving, coming out of that Oregon system, goes to the Buccaneers. Buccaneers behind Rachaad White don't have a whole lot. We could see Irving actually end up being a guy that moves to a number 2 spot there and gets more work than some of the guys ahead of him. And then number 10 for me, Will Shipley. I like the player, but he lands with the Eagles, who just made a massive commitment to Saquon Barkley, another one of those 3-down workhorse backs. The danger with Eagles running backs also is always the fact that Jalen Hurts ends up taking a lot of the goal line work. So that's something to watch out for. A couple other ones, if you're looking for some stashes at the running back room, Dylan Lobb went to the Raiders. Raiders have kind of an unsettled backfield. They have Zamir White and Alexander Madison now. He's a guy I've been picking up and throwing on a practice squad. And Isaiah Guerrero went to the 49ers. Obviously, they still have Christian McCaffrey. They have Elijah Mitchell, but you always are interested and at least stashing draft picks the 49ers make in the backfield. That takes us through running backs. Let's transition to wide receivers. This is probably the best part of the class of 2024. And I'm going to be honest, I would probably take 3 of these receivers before I hit JJ McCarthy, even in super flex drafts. I think wide receivers probably where the value and some of the best production is going to be. Number 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. Went to the Cardinals, was the number 1 receiver for most of us going into the draft, was the first receiver taken, number 4 overall. If you want to take him at the top of even a super flex draft, I wouldn't begrudge you. I think he goes no later than the 2nd pick. He is just right up there. Number 2, Malik Neighbors. Maybe not the greatest landing spot in the Giants. I still have questions about their passing, their quarterbacking group, but Neighbors is a talent and is clearly the best receiver on their team. I have no problem. I would probably start taking him at number 4 in Superflex. I would take Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Marvin Harrison probably as the top 3, and then Neighbors. And this next guy, number 3 for me, Rome Odunze, who went to the Bears, going to be able to grow alongside Caleb Williams. May not have the biggest first year because they went and acquired Keenan Allen. They still have DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, but I think Odunze is probably likely the future. After that, there's a talented group of receivers. I think it comes down to a little bit of personal preference. I actually have Xavier Worthy, number 4 at the Chiefs. I have long preached that you don't want to overdraft and overrate players from the draft just because they went to the Chiefs, but he's fast. He's a good producer. I think the Chiefs need some production at wide receiver. I have a lot of questions about Rashee Rice after this offseason. So Worthy for me kind of jumps up to top that next tier. At number 5, Brian Thomas Jr. He was my number 4 receiver going into the draft. I didn't drop him that much. I like the landing spot with the Jaguars, especially now that they've released Zay Jones. I think their top 3 shaping up to be Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, who has never been a personal favorite of mine, and Thomas Jr. I like his potential there. At number 6, Ladd McConkey went to the Chargers, another group that's a little bit in flux. Will we get a big year 2 jump from Quentin Johnson? That remains to be seen. They have Josh Palmer, but then it's kind of McConkey. They let go of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, so there is an opening there. We know Justin Herbert has talent. Same thing for my number 7, Keon Coleman went to the Bills. I know some people weren't wild about the player and the location, but the Bills need wide receivers. They lost Gabe Davis in free agency. They traded Stephon Diggs. Curtis Samuel, a good role player. I like Khalil Shakir as a decent role player, but Keon Coleman could easily come and be basically a number one receiver for them. Number 8, maybe a bit of a homer pick. I went with Troy Franklin. The Broncos moved up to snag him top of the 4th round, but he was Bo Nix's receiver at Oregon. I think they're looking toward the future a little bit. They moved Jerry Jeudy this offseason. We don't know how much Tim Patrick has left. We didn't see Marvin Mims take as big of a step last year as I expected. And I think Cortland Sutton, while he's still there and I expect him to still be there in 2024, might not be a long-term guy with the Broncos anymore. I think Troy Franklin could end up being a guy that has a big role. Number 9 for me, Ricky Pearsall. Went in the tail end of the 1st round to the 49ers. I like the landing spot, especially as you look at, are they a little unsettled with the future for Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk? There could end up being a good opportunity there. We will see. He's another player that may not have the biggest year one, but I think there's good potential in the future. Number 10, Malachi Corley. They picked up Mike Williams. They still have Garrett Williams, but the Jets are all in. They have a more wide open receiver group beyond that. Xavier Gipson was a good story as an undrafted free agent, more of a special teams player. Alan Lazard seems to have completely fallen out of favor and fallen off the shelf. So I think Corley could work himself into a good position even in year one with Aaron Rodgers. Beyond that, a couple guys I might be looking at. Jalen McMillan. I like the talent going into the draft. He lands in a decent spot with the Buccaneers, more of probably a long-term play as they still have Chris Godwin, Mike Evans there right now, but a great opportunity to be kind of that number 3. I like him a little bit better than Trey Palmer. 12, I had Xavier Legette, a guy who went to the Panthers. The Panthers moved up in the 1st round to snag him. They went and got Deontay Johnson this offseason. They still have Adam Thielen, and they still have Jonathan Mingo, who was a receiver they took last year. How does Legette profile in? Is he going to be the receiver 3? Can he leapfrog Thielen? A lot of questions to be answered there, but definitely a guy that should be going right up in the 1st and 2nd round. Couple other receivers just to round out my top 15. Jalen Polk, he went in the 2nd round to the Patriots. People probably didn't have him this high going into the draft. I know I didn't, but draft capital and the wide open room in New England means I think he's got to be a 2nd round guy. I know some people are jumping on Javon Baker, who was another receiver that went late for the Patriots, but draft capital means something. So I think you have to take a shot there. 14 for me was Jermaine Burton, a guy that went to the Bengals. They lost Tyler Boyd. They currently have T. Higgins on the franchise tag. How long will he be with them? Those are fair questions. They're a good passing offense. Jermaine Burton could have a future slot, so a guy I'm taking a shot on. And then the next and the last guy I'll touch on is Adonai Mitchell, who went to the Indianapolis Colts. I still think Michael Pittman Jr. is clearly the number 1 there. I liked what we saw from Josh Downs last year. I think this is more of an indictment of Alec Pierce, but they've been taking receivers each of the last few years. Mitchell, good value for them where he fell a little bit in the draft. We'll see how he works into that offense. Also see what the passing volume is with Anthony Richardson. We only saw a couple of games last year with Richardson in there, so it's hard to get a great feel. Last but not least, let's turn it over to tight ends. And number 1 tight end is definitely Brock Bowers. He slipped a little bit, went number 13 to the Raiders. I didn't love the landing spot. A lot of questions for me about that Raiders offense starting at quarterback. They also had taken a tight end fairly early last year and didn't really merge them in. They still have Devontae Adams. They still have Jacoby Myers, but Bowers, a special talent. He should still be the first tight end taken. I don't necessarily begrudge you if you don't take him in the 1st round of a Superflex draft based on where he landed, but he definitely should be going in the 1st round of 1 QB drafts. I took him around pick 7 and 8 in a couple of spots. That feels about right to me. Number 2, Ben Stinnett, went to the Commanders. Great landing spot, great potential. They have Zach Ertz kind of there as a veteran bridge, but he's another guy he can grow with his young quarterback, Jaden Daniels. Good draft capital. And then we did not see any tight ends after those 2 go until the 4th round. In that 4th round, Theo Johnson went to the Giants. He's my number 3. A lot of questions about Darren Waller. If he doesn't retire this year, it's hard to imagine he goes super long. I think the Giants, right when there was bubbling up that Waller had decided to retire, he went like a couple of picks right after that, right when the Giants were up. Obviously, they see him as a development prospect, as somebody that could have a role there. Jatavian Sanders goes to the Panthers. Tommy Tremble looks like he's going to get the first shot at being the starter this year, but they have an unsettled position there at tight end for the Panthers. Jatavian Sanders, a talented guy out of Texas, could end up having an impact there. Number 5 for me is Eric All, went to the Bengals, another team that a little bit unsettled at tight end. They brought in Mike Gesicki on a 1-year deal to kind of be that veteran presence, but let's see what All can do, the tight end out of Iowa. Number 6, Cade Stover went to the Texans. I think the trouble for me is it feels like his path is a little bit blocked. They just re-upped with Dalton Schultz on a 3-year deal, and he looked great last year. They still have Brevin Jordan, a development prospect who's been there for a few years, who we've seen flashes of, that hasn't really been able to get on the field. What kind of production am I getting from Cade Stover? So when you get to All, Stover, and then the last 2 I'll mention, Tip Raymond, probably more of a blocker, but he went in the 3rd round to the Cardinals, so I wouldn't be surprised if you want to pick him up at the end of drafts, somebody to put on a practice squad. And then Johnny Wilson went to the Eagles. He's technically listed on most sites as a wide receiver. There is some thought that he will get converted over to tight end. Either way, for me, he's a guy I'm stashing on a practice squad, so I kind of have him in that range. Well, that'll do it for me. A quick look at some of my rookie rankings. I hope you're having a lot of fun out there doing rookie drafts. We'll see you a little bit later at the end of May as we start looking at some dynasty rankings as we get ready to move into the next season. Until then, you have a wonderful day.